Kedoshim, holy. God's trumpet call presents. 7th reading from the book of Leviticus. 30th reading from Torah. Outline of Torah portion. Ritual and moral laws. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 1 to 37. The Hebrew word Kedoshim means holy. Adonai spoke to Moshe and said, "Speak to the entire community of Israel. Tell them, you people are to be holy because I, Adonai your God, am holy." The commandment was not only to the priests, Levites, or only to a part of the community. God commanded the entire community to be holy. To be holy means to be separate or set apart. Leviticus chapter 19 and 20 give the commandments of how to be holy or set apart. God commanded that everyone shall revere his father and mother. To revere is to fear. The idea here is a repetition of the fifth commandment given in Exodus chapter 20 verse 12. God spoke about honoring one's parents many times in the Bible. Many scripture verses are found in the book of Proverbs on this subject, indicating the importance of it for the stability and the health of the community. It is easy for a child to be obedient to God, for he knows he will be punished for his disobedience. But all children, even the older ones, must honor their parents, just as we fear God, knowing that we will face consequences for our disobedience. We need to bear in mind to value our parents' opinions, always seek their counsel, and take note of their disapprovals. Relationships are a two-way process. Some parents may not be that supportive, yet one can refrain from disrespecting, not arguing, criticizing their parents. For the commandment is to honor the parents. The Lord commanded the Israelites to keep my Sabbath. The fourth commandment found in Exodus chapter 20 verse 8 to 11 is repeated here. To hold Sabbaths as God commanded as a day of rest. God created us and He knows that we need the rest spiritually, mentally and physically. And Sabbath is an appointment that we need to keep with the Creator. Adonai commanded the Israelites not to turn to idols, not to make for themselves a molded god. This essentially repeats the idea of the second commandment found in Exodus chapter 20 verse 4 to 6. Hebrew word used for idols is ha-elim. Elil means insufficiency or worthlessness. Having told that these things are nothing, worthless, the Lord tells them not to make for themselves molded gods. Psalms 118 explains that those who make them are like them. So is everyone who trusts in them. The Lord commanded about peace offerings, that it will be done out of own free will to enjoy peace and fellowship with God. A better translation of the word li-sunekhem would be, you shall offer it for your acceptance. He commanded that offering was to be eaten on the same day it was offered, and it was not to be eaten after 2 days. To eat it on the third day was an abomination. The person has profaned or treated it as if it was not sacred, and the person was to bear his iniquity and will be cut off from his people. Ritual and moral laws, continuation. The world's way of succeeding is to grab every opportunity that seems profitable and maximize what you can receive from those profitable ventures. But the Torah shows a different path for the farmers of Israel. Adonai commanded that when harvesting fields, farmers were not to completely harvest their fields, so the poor and the needy could come and glean the remains. Grain were left at the corners of the field, and every grape of the vineyard was not harvested. The commandment was to leave them for the poor and the stranger. God wanted the farmers to be generous. It gave the poor an opportunity to come to the fields and gather food for them. And they were also saved from begging food from the farmers. These commandments provided the background for the story of Ruth. In Ruth chapter 2, verse 2 and 3, Ruth was gleaning the fields when she was noticed by Boaz. Ruth, a Moabite, was a poor widow living with her widowed mother-in-law, Naomi. She joined other destitute women in the community to glean the fields. Boaz, a landowner, was a close relative and according to Jewish law had the right to marry Ruth. There was another relative who was closer in line to marry Ruth, but he declined. After that, Boaz made the commitment in front of the town's leaders that he would take Ruth as his wife. Boaz and Ruth had a son named Obed, who later became the grandfather of King David. God cares for the poor. In addition to these commandments, every 3 years a special tithe is collected for the relief of the poor. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 28 to 29, 26, 12 to 15. These laws have application even in other fields of work, not only in agriculture. What God expects from us is to be generous towards the needy. God commanded about honesty. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. This repeats the 8th commandment given in Exodus chapter 20, verse 15. It set another important foundation for the society. Society expects the religious to act with integrity. If a believer in Yeshua HaMashiach or an observant Jew act without integrity, it damages the reputation of God. A person who acts without integrity profanes the name of God. Further, God commanded, "You shall not swear by my name falsely." What was forbidden in Exodus chapter 27 is discussed again. God commanded not to cheat the neighbor, that is, not to take money out of deception. God cared for the workers. He commanded that the wages of him who is hired must be paid promptly. His wages not to remain with the one who hired him all night until morning, for it is through his wages the worker supports his life and his family. Ritual and moral laws continuation. God commanded to show compassion on those who have disabilities and not to mistreat them. He commanded, "You shall not curse a deaf man." Leviticus chapter 19:14. For a deaf person cannot hear a curse, but others can. People believed that the curse had its own power to cause harm to the deaf person, and he would be unable to counteract it. The situation is the same when we verbally assault an individual in his or her absence. We may feel free to do it, but the victim is unaware of it. We need to train ourselves to refrain from speaking negative words about others. If there is something that needs to be corrected, then it must be a rebuke offered directly at that person. It's a mean thing to put a stumbling block before the blind. Some believe that those who are disabled are cursed by God because of sins of that person or because of sins of his ancestors. But God commanded to show compassion on those who are with disabilities. Likewise, to trip a blind person purposely is cruelty. In John chapter 9, verse 1 to 5, the disciples of Yeshua HaMashiach asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Yeshua HaMashiach answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. God commanded that no injustice be done in judgment. The command was for the judges and magistrates. Exodus chapter 21:23 gives many principles for legal decisions. What God requires is not to be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. Yeshua HaMashiach in John chapter 7 verse 24 said, do not judge according to the appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. God prohibited spreading slander among people. That is, not to gossip about the lives of other people. God commanded to protect the lives of those around us. God commanded, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. We are called to love not only in action but also in heart. One may rebuke the neighbor and not bear sin because of him. God's direction is not to take vengeance and not to bear any grudge against anyone. Where there is love, it is not difficult to correct. Ritual and moral laws continuation. Mixing of different species of livestock, seed, and fabrics was a pagan practice in the ancient world. They considered it to be a source of magical power. But God said to the Israelites to keep my statutes. He forbade sowing fields with mixed seed, garments of mixed linen and wool. In the event a concubine who is engaged to a free man is raped, who has neither been redeemed nor given her freedom, they are not to be put to death because she was not free. He is to offer a guilt offering, and the priest is to make atonement to him, and he will be forgiven. God commanded the Israelites concerning what they would plant in the promised land. When the Israelites enter the promised land and plant all kinds of trees for food, the Lord commanded that for 3 years the fruits will be counted as uncircumcised, and it is not to be eaten. On the 4th year all fruits shall be holy and a praise to the Lord. In the 5th year you may eat its fruits. God gave commandments to ensure separation from certain pagan practices. To eat anything with blood was forbidden, and practicing divination and soothsaying was prohibited. Shaving around the sides of the head, disfiguring the edges of your beard, and making cuttings in the flesh for the dead, and tattoos were forbidden. God commanded not to engage the daughters in ritual prostitution, which was a common practice at that time. Pagans used mediums and familiar spirits to sought to contact the dead or other spirits, but God forbade them, and those who seek after such things will be defiled by them. For the laws emphasizing on kindness and justice are given. God commanded to honor the elderly, very specially Torah scholars, because of the wisdom they have through their study and labor in the Torah. Great respect must be shown for a Torah scholar. When he walks into the room, we must stand up. We need to respect our teachers in the same manner. If there is a stranger in the land, God commanded to treat him as one born among the Israelites. God commanded that the foreigner is to be loved as they love themselves, and reminded the children of Israel that they too were strangers in the land of Egypt. God wants his people to do business honestly. Therefore, there shall be no injustice in judgment, in measurement of length, weight, or volume. Penalties for violations of holiness. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 1 to 27. Previously, Adonai gave moral laws and ceremonial laws for holy conduct towards God and towards fellow man. Adonai revealed through Moshe to the Israelites his will. In chapter 20, penalties for disobedience to God are given. Before bringing the Israelites to the promised land, God told them that many perversions are taking place in the land of Canaan, and the occupants of the land are vomited out because of the perversions, and Adonai instructed the Israelites to abstain from all the pagan practices. The commandments given in chapter 20 are for the entire hearing of the congregation of Israel and foreigners living in Israel. The laws are to be commonly known among them and adhered to by all of them. God made it community effort and a responsibility. In chapter 20, the chapter 20 opens with the prohibition of child sacrifices to Molech. The Hebrew word for descendants is mizarov, from zara meaning seed. According to the pagan practices that existed those days, it may mean to offer man's semen to the idol or to a prostitute of Molech, or child sacrifice. Seed of Israel needed to be kept pure and holy. It had to be protected from pagan practices. Offering seed to Molech directly or indirectly was a direct challenge in bringing Messiah into the world. Penalty for breaking this law was to stone the person to death, and God will set his face against that man, and he will be cut off from his people. Penalties for violations of holiness continuation. In the event people don't stone him or sufficient evidence is not available to convict him, still it will not negate the punishment prescribed for him. God will set his face against him, his family, and everyone who follows him to go fornicating after Molech will be cut off from his people. The reasons to cut off the offender are: he has cut himself off through his own actions. He has defiled Lord's sanctuary. The offender would profane Lord's holy name. Likewise, a person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them, God will set his face against that person and cut him off from his people. This was followed with a positive commandment by God, commanding the Israelites to consecrate themselves and be holy. In verse 7, God said, "Consecrate yourselves therefore and be holy, for I am the Lord your God." The Israelites were to take every precaution and stay clear of that which is defile them. Things that are morally offensive, such things that would profane the name of the Lord and defile the sanctuary. In a vast community, holiness would only be achieved by refraining from such sin, taking account of and punishing offenders of sin, or following the purification process through the sacrificial system when allowed. To curse one's father or mother is to bring discredit upon the name of the Lord, for it is God who ordains the genealogy of the child.